Girls and women have a right to be equal everywhere.
In every country and in every aspect of life.
Yet girls and women face discrimination and exclusion in every country in the world,
which holds everyone back.
But people around the world are fighting for fairness.
Combating stereotypes,
building inclusive systems,
supporting women's economic opportunity,
fighting for health equity,
and defending voting rights and legal protections for women around the world.
We won't stop
until we achieve equality
for all girls and all women,
wherever they are.
Let the world know you stand with the champions and change makers
working to ensure girls and women are equal everywhere.
Join us in candid discussions
with those on the front line of this fight
in our discussion series, Champions for Change.
Champions for Change.
And follow along using @UN Foundation, #EqualEverywhere. Hello, and welcome to What Now? A world of challenges for women and their work, a conversation that is part of our 2022 Equal Everywhere discussion series. I'm Michelle Milford Morse, Vice President for Girls and Women's Strategy at the United Nations Foundation. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, women's economic freedom and opportunity were deeply challenged throughout the world, an issue exacerbated by bad habits, bad norms, and bad laws. COVID-19 laid bare the critical role that women play in economic recovery and prosperity. It is critical to design economic programs that consider what women really want and need and introduce better laws and policies to ensure durable and meaningful change. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by a group of women tackling these issues head on. Maria Bystedt is the strategy lead at the H&M Foundation. Lakshmi Pattabi Raman is Executive Director of Saamuhika Shakti at the Center for Social Innovation at the NEDGE Foundation. And Tia Trumbic is Program Manager for the Women, Business, and the Law program at the World Bank. Thank you all for joining me today.
Maria, your job is to invest in programs and ideas that are a catalyst for inclusive societies. Women's full participation in economies is a well-known catalyst. So why does it continue to be a struggle? And what have you learned about good programs that foster women's economic security? What doesn't work, and tell us what's required.
Well, I think that the core of the problem is that attempts to solve the issue often fail to address the full picture. And instead to create change, they try to create change within isolated areas. And we must really acknowledge that no social change exists in isolation, right? It's always underpinned by a complex system of interrelated barriers. And therefore, the solutions need to be as complex as the problem. And what we have learned throughout the years is that you must address the whole system and also aim for systems change in order to create sustainable impact. And an example is our global program on women's economic empowerment together with CARE has shown that it's not enough to, for example, only provide skilling programs, to offer women training in, say, business management or leadership skills. You also need to work on the enabling environments around the women. And that means, of course, addressing the policies that regulate access to participation for women at the same time as you work on creating platforms for women to have a voice and decision-making power. But you also need to enable those power shifts. You simultaneously have to work on the implicit levels of mental models and create perception change, not only with the power holders, including the husbands and men in the community, but also with the women themselves to build their confidence and trust in themselves. So only if you can create those enabling environments, women will be really able to make full use of their skills and capabilities and access their rights to full economic participation.
Right. So you're talking about redesigning systems, really, and including everybody in that design. Lakshmi, you have done some work in this area too, and I know many of us, and I'm certainly not the only one, have grown to dislike the term economic empowerment because it doesn't do the thing that Maria is talking about. It puts the onus fully on the woman who must endure discriminatory laws and exclusionary systems. I mean, consider the banking systems and digital services, and also burdensome norms like the unpaid care burden. Your work demonstrates that actually you need collective action by many to design work opportunities and economies that give everyone equal access and opportunity. So tell us a little bit more about the Collective Impact Project and tell us what works for women.
I completely agree with you, Michelle. In working towards enabling equity and equitable access to economic opportunities for women and girls, very often they're expected to do more to overcome the constraints of their circumstances and access these opportunities. And that in itself ends up imposing more burden on them. In Saamuhika Shakti, our project, we work with informal waste pickers, a significant number of whom are women. In order to create more sustainable and systemic change, like Maria mentioned, we're working not just with the women, but with all the stakeholders around them, their family members, be it their spouses, parents, or children, community leaders, school administrators and teachers, or potential employers, or even the residents of the city in which we work, to create a truly enabling environment for these women to access economic opportunities. And of course, in addition to creating livelihood opportunities, be it vocational training or life skills training, as Maria mentioned, we're taking a multidimensional approach of simultaneously addressing the various challenges that they face. And here it's important to not just come in with a hypothesis of what these challenges might be or what are their priorities in terms of the problems that they want addressed. So to actively listen to the voice of the women that we're serving and respond accordingly. So be it their own education or social security or healthcare, menstrual hygiene, it's important to listen and address all of these simultaneously to make the change more sustainable.
The most important thing is to listen. Taya, your team tracks laws and regulations affecting women's economic inclusion across 190 countries. You've just published your latest report on these findings. What trends are you seeing? And speaking of collective action, how can civil society leaders and citizens help realize fairer laws and policies?
Thank you, Michelle. It takes all of us to really have an effect on this change. What we do at Women, Business, and the Law report at the World Bank is we provide insights in how employment and entrepreneurship are affected by legal discrimination and how this impacts economic outcomes such as women's participation in the labor market and the wage gap. When societies become more equal, economies become more resilient. But how can countries reach their full potential when the law restricts women's rights and opportunities? In too many countries around the world, many women are prevented from working and running businesses simply because of their sex. And as the world enters the third year of COVID-19 pandemic, threats to our health, safety, and the planet are calling attention to the inequalities and injustices that persist. Despite their key role in the development of all of this, the burden of many crises falls upon women. It's shocking to me that in 2022, we are still seeing so many discriminatory laws around the world that restrict women from playing an equal part in the economy. The most recent Women, Business, and the Law data and research confirm that despite some progress, which is to be applauded, women are on average still having only 3/4 of the rights of men. But get this, we've also found some studies by our colleagues in the World Bank that women's lifetime earnings are only 2/3 those of men. Closing this gap in earnings could add $172 trillion to the world's economy. That is equivalent to 2 times the world's annual GDP. Why do women earn less in their lifetime? They work less hours, they work in jobs that pay less, and even when they do work in the same jobs, they're paid less. And in many countries, it is legally allowed to pay women less. In 95 countries, it's still acceptable to pay women less for the same work.
Taya, you've just illuminated why we chose this as our theme this year for Equal Everywhere. And beautifully, and you've also given us a couple of glimmers of hope because citizens can demand change and change is possible in these countries. So I want to ask that question of Lakshmi. Lakshmi, what glimmers of hope do you see in this environment, this economic environment for women?
I think even the very recognition of the differentiated impact that the pandemic has had on women and girls has meant that various organizations and institutions which are working in the space now are committing to act with a sense of urgency to correct it. And at a macro level, that in itself is encouraging. We've also seen in our work and approach in Saamuhika Shakti that organizations are willing to learn from each other and to modify their way of working in order to enable a more equitable society. And we hope to be able to create more platforms for sharing these learnings and experiences beyond the immediate circle of our partners to enable change at a larger scale. And of course, I just want to wrap by saying I think the most encouraging and for me personally, the most inspiring is the early adapters, the women that join programs early and become role models in themselves for other women in the community is very, very encouraging, be it as leaders solving issues in their community or women in self-help groups going on to start businesses on their own.
That is encouraging, in fact. So Maria, then, are we on our way to inclusive societies? What have you learned and what do you see?
I think that there's good headway towards a shift towards that systems change approach, which centers equity within it. But it is a challenging and slow game, and this requires that actors with power, that includes people like us, donors, development institutions, relinquish some of their power then to the primary actors, those with lived experience. And if we want to create inclusive societies for women and girls, they need to co-create the solutions. It's so obvious, and be given that opportunity as well. So it means that, usual processes of getting things done need to change to allow for that power shift. Mm-hmm. And I think that the importance of centering equity in programming like this has indeed become more and more highlighted. And we're proud also to see that our India program, Saamuhika Shakti, was mentioned in a recent Stanford Social Innovation Review article that focused on just that. And lastly, I wanted also to bring up that donors also need to change how they fund. And dare to take that leap to fund these complex and sometimes cumbersome and slow processes that social change requires. It's difficult, of course, as attribution becomes harder to prove and the results may be less tangible and take time to materialize. But H&M Foundation believes that this is the only way forward, and we will do our best to inspire other donors by showing that it can be done, using examples of working with collective impact like Saamuhika Shakti.
Well, thank you, Maria, Taya, Lakshmi, for joining our discussion. What now? A world of challenges for women in their work. Thank you so much. We appreciate your expertise. And thank you, our audience, for watching part of our Champions for Change discussion series. The fight continues, the conversation continues, and we hope you will continue the dialogue at home, at work, and online using the hashtag #EqualEverywhere. Thank you.